because everything that Mark does with his music is very thought out, and he has a reason behind every single thing he does.
What about the rest of the stuff I do?
And
Not
his
so
music,
thoughtful. Not so thoughtful there. Greetings, everyone. Today I would like to speak about this album, The Bluebird. This is the last record that I made, and it came out January of 2019. So in 2017, 2018, I found myself thinking about making a new record, and I got a new licensing agreement with the French metal label Season of Mist. And as part of that agreement to release my back catalog, they also wanted a new record from me, which became the Bluebird. So that's how that whole thing started. And the Bluebird is really kind of about the elusive nature of happiness and the transient nature of it also. And something which I've been acutely aware of my entire life, suffering from depression for a great deal of it. I've always found happiness quite elusive and transient. And of course, happiness is transient. Nobody is perpetually happy unless they are actually insane. So despite all of the propaganda out there about how you're supposed to be happy all the time, if you were happy all the time, there would be issues with that, I feel. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe you can tell me. So it's an American thing. You're supposed to be happy all the time, right? Is it an American thing? Tell me, Americans. So I started writing songs. I had a backlog of material, as I usually always do. And I'm just going to start going through the record and talking about some of the music on here. There's a couple of variations between the two formats. There's an LP and there's a CD also here, which also has a beautiful little booklet in it, designed by my dear wife, Jennifer. And she also did the incredible artwork on this, of course. So the very first song on here is called No Space Holds the Weight. It's an instrumental song. And kind of like a micro overture to the whole thing. And there's sort of a desolation to it, which reflects this great photo, and it's also echoed on the cover. And I wouldn't say necessarily it's about a search for anything. It's just basically setting a tone. This record is kind of a journey record. You need to, not the band Journey, but it's kind of a record to listen to from front to back and just kind of go with the places that it goes to. So it starts off with this pretty spacious sounding solo guitar thing, and then goes right into this thing called Futurist Manifesto. And since I was signing to this kind of extreme metal label, and they have a lot of really incredibly fast metal bands on there and stuff, and I've never been able to really do that kind of thing successfully, but I kind of did this little piece called Futurist Manifesto as a nod in that direction. The drummer that I was playing with, R.L.Hulsman, could play those types of beats pretty well, and I was kind of grappling with doing the extreme distorted guitar thing on it, and it just wasn't sounding good. So I went in the opposite direction and decided to have super clean guitars do this, and it just made the drums more pronounced and seemed to work out better having clean guitars do that super fast thing. So that's what I did, and it was just kind of a counterpoint to the usual, this is really fast and really distorted thing. This is really fast and really clean sounding. So that kicks off the whole thing. And then it goes into a song called Radiant Gravity, which is an instrumental, kind of very peaceful sounding thing. More or less psychedelic, extremely moody sounding, very sort of insular and introverted sounding, with a very spacious guitar, kind of a repetitive chord progression that's somewhat jazz flavored. And that goes into a song called "O Ye of Little Faith," which is more or less me doing kind of a Black Sabbath song. Once again, it's a nod to the stuff that Season of Mist was putting out, but also I like Black Sabbath, and I've been influenced by Black Sabbath to a smallish degree, but it's still kind of out of my wheelhouse a little bit. But anyway, this song has another one of those contrapuntal moves. I had this big, loud sounding guitar solo over the end part of it, and it just wasn't sitting in the track right. The whole thing kind of ended up with this big wall of sound thing with this big wailing guitar solo over the top. And it was kind of like the Futurist Manifesto thing, where I just thought I need to go in exactly the opposite direction with this. So instead of having a big wailing guitar solo take the song out, I just dialed the thing way down and did more of a clean bluesy sounding thing, and it sounded more ethereal and just worked way better within the track, and I was infinitely more pleased with that direction than trying to do some big noisy thing that was heavy. It made it sound even heavier by taking it all the way down and having it be more of a mellow thing. The next track is called "Our Revels Now Are Ended." The title comes from Prospero's speech at the end of The Tempest. And he's basically saying, because they put on a little play in The Tempest to entertain this couple that's getting married, and he kind of abruptly ends the play and says, "Our revels now are ended," and it's kind of this unmasking thing. And for me, it was just a way of kind of sort of dismissing everything that's come previously as having a point of intention, which was basically, okay, now I'm on a metal label, and so I'm going to do metal things. And so I did the metal things, and now things are going to kind of move in somewhat of a different direction, which they do. So this is sort of like the equivalent of if you go to a place and you have a chef's tasting menu or something with 8 or 9 courses. In between the courses, they bring you a little palate refresher. It might be like a little scoop of sorbet or something like that. So scattered throughout this record, there are little pieces of music that are maybe a minute or a minute and a half or less or something, that are nothing less than palate refreshers. And Our Revels Now Are Ended is one of those little palate refreshers, and it does exactly what it's supposed to do. And then the next song is called "Hell is a City." And this is the first song on the record to have Aaron Lack playing on it, who is my longtime drummer, and he's played on pretty much all of my previous records except for the Silent Treatment. And also, he doesn't play on The Value of Decay, but pretty much I've worked with him consistently for, it's got to be more than 10 years now, I think. Aaron's an incredible multi-instrumentalist. On this record, he plays vibes. He's a monster vibraphone player, and of course, a monster drummer too. And so he has just a beautiful feel on this song, and I also used a stand-up bass player, G. Pat Harris, recommended to me by Aaron. And this has a very desolate feel to it. And the lyrics are about living in cities and what that feels like. And you can listen to the lyrics and get the imagery pretty well. It's somewhat abstract, but it reflects my imagery of what cities are like to me on an internal level. There's also a great video that goes with this, put together by my wife Jennifer, that you can see. So there will be a link below to that video, which you can check out also. Now the next song is a song called Somnambulist. But it's only on the CD. And this is almost a 7-minute long song, so if you want to hear that song, you have to hear the CD. Probably everybody's streaming out there. I think there's only one version of this album streaming, but there wasn't enough room to put it on a single LP. So that song, Somnambulist, is on here. And it's basically about early man and woman and whatever else was there falling asleep and dreaming in the distant past. That's what that song is about. It's very quiet, very insular, and very moody. And it's a cool song. It came out of just really dreaming and sort of the sense that you have when you're in a waking dream, or how you feel right after you've had a powerful dream, that kind of lingering sense of a dream or whatever. And it also has one of my favorite effects on it, which is the univibe. I always try to get a song with univibe or phasing on it on one of my records someplace. And this, of course, is my nod to one of my favorite musicians, Robin Trower, who's been a big influence on me and my career and my songwriting. So listen for that. The next tune is called Through the Ringing Cedars, and that is another kind of palate cleanser. And my publicist at the time, Dave Brenner, made a really cool video to go to this, which I think is on the Season of Mist YouTube page, so I'll put a link to that as well, and you can check that out. On the album, the next song is Maximum Hemingway. Which also has a great video made by Jennifer, and you can see that one. Maximum Hemingway is about, of course, Ernest Hemingway, and has some of the sort of tropes that exist within his writing. It's very basic, very to the point. There's not a lot of fluff. I have some of the lyrics to Maximum Hemingway here. I can't find all of them, but to give you a flavor of it: to climb the mountain, fall into the pit. You got to ride the rainbow to the bitter end. Get up before the light, silent in the glade, the fog is lifting, and here we wait. And looking through my notes here, I actually found the original drum part, which will make all of you really happy, I'm sure. There's the original drum part for it. I wrote it in Logic, printed it out, and R.L.Hulsman played this drum part pretty much exactly, adding his own flavors to it. So that's one of the cool things about Logic X, is that you can construct things, print them out, and then have real musicians play them. So I do like the Maximum Hemingway song. I think it's very Melvins-esque, which I had a little bit to do with. And so that is a reflection of that. The next song is a song called They Have Won. And this is sort of a commentary by me on observing just the arc of the smartphone and everything that it has become and everything that comes through it. The sum of the knowledge of mankind at your fingertips, as well as the most hellish advertising and coercive vehicle ever created. And that's my take on it. And basically, now everybody's got a feedback loop in their pocket of their own essence being shot back at them, whether they know it or not. But that's what's happening, people. So some of the lyrics from that reflect my sentiments on that exactly. They didn't raise a finger. They didn't point a gun. There wasn't any kind of threatening noise coming from above. No one ever noticed it happen quietly. Everybody just fell asleep and stared into a screen. So we're all effectively asleep, or we're in a simulacrum, or we're on a matrix, or where are we? Discuss. Tell me what you think. And then the last verse is, little hands are busy, they slide across the glass. It answers every question you might ever want to ask. So you can listen to the rest of the lyrics to get yet even more insights into what is going on with that. I can't promise any revelations, but maybe there are some. I don't really know. Moving on to the next song, which is somewhat related to They Have Won. It's a song called Happiness Machine. And of course, your little gadget is your happiness machine. So the lyrics to Happiness Machine reflect some of the same ideas in They Have Won, just extrapolated out further, a little more specific and elusive at the same time. In your hand, on your wrist, on your finger, on your list, in your eye, in your bones, on your tongue, down your throat. Next verse, in your car, on your phone, in the game, or on the show, in the air, on the web, on the chain, in your head. That's that, the cheery lyrics to The Happiness Machine. And it is in fact happy and horrible at the same time. So we got the yin and yang of everything in our hand. It's wonderful, isn't it? The Happiness Machine has a cool little riff in 7, and the whole song is in in 7. And it's kind of King Crimson-y, really. This sort of exposes my influence from that particular band, and other places on the record do too. Anybody who knows me and listens to my music can hear Crimson-esque things happening in there. I do love the little guitar solo that I came up with in this, and the whole song sounds super punchy, is mixed very nicely by Chad Bamford, who's mixed all of my records, as is the rest of the record. I mean, he makes the stuff just jump out of the speakers. So thank you, Chad. So this is a little confusing, and I'm great at confusing myself when I'm working on anything, basically, and I have to take copious notes to keep myself on track. Everything gets so complex for some reason. I don't know why. I think it's just my brain spinning off into different tangents or whatever. Everything is just distractive to me within my own mind, let alone working on singular project, just like what I just said. So really there's kind of 2 different versions of the Bluebird, and one is the record version and one is the CD version. And as I mentioned, the CD version has a big long song in it called Somnambulist, which is not on the LP due to space limitations, and vice versa. There's a thing on the LP version that is not on the CD version, just to make it more complex. And it's kind of a big thing and part of the sentimentality and the emotion of this record, and it's something called On Father's Day. And I am a product of a divorced family. I was had to say goodbye to my real father when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and was taken away from that experience by my mother and stepfather. But I maintained as much contact as I could with my father throughout my childhood, and Father's Day for me growing up was always fairly triggering. I had not the best relationship with my stepfather, and to give him a little bit of slack, he was not fully grown emotionally at the time and just didn't really know what to do with a couple of kids, me being the oldest one, going, "You're not my father." So he reacted poorly to that. So my stepfather was effectively a teenager and ill-equipped to deal with any kind of young children that were from a previous marriage. And he and I just butted heads thoroughly throughout a lot of our existence. So anyway, every Father's Day I would be thinking about my real father and how that option was just unavailable to me, a loving, genuine father. So when I was working on the Bluebird, I got into kind of an emotional space about all of this. And I wrote this little thing. It's like one of those little filler pieces that's maybe a minute and a half or something like that, called On Father's Day, which is about how I would kind of feel as these Father's Days came up continually through my childhood and teenage years. When I was working on the record, I became aware that my father was not doing very well. He lived in the UK. And so I finished the record, and I'd planned to be mixing the record a couple of months after I'd finished it in 2018. And I got a message that my father had died. And of course I was upset about this. And the funeral was planned for right in the middle of when I was mixing this record. So I basically had to make a 3 or 4 day space right in the middle of my mixing schedule in LA and go to the UK for my father's funeral, which I did. And I came back and continued mixing the record. So this little piece of music on Father's Day really changed the entire aspect of the record for me and gave it an extra emotional resonance that I didn't expect. And of course I was kind of in go mode. I had to mix the record, go to the UK, come back, finish mixing the record, and the whole thing really didn't start sinking in until much later. Which it still does. Revisiting it takes me all the way back there. So On Father's Day is a song that you can only get on the LP version of this, but I think streaming, the whole thing is on there, as I mentioned before. The last song on both the record and the CD is a song called Nothing Out There. And while appearing to be extremely bleak lyric-wise, I find it also sort of comforting to realize that there probably isn't anything out there in the universe, or wherever it is, it's so far that we're like fleas hopping around in the dirt. Basically, we're never going to get there. And this also is kind of a commentary on self-improvement and new age thinking and all this kind of stuff that is predicated on there being these fantastic things that you can put your hands on. Religion is really all about this, that there's something just out of reach that if you can just get there, everything's going to be great. So this song is like a serious debunking of all of those types of things. I may or may not believe some of those things, depending on how I'm feeling. It's very elastic with me. I'm not hardcore into any demagoguery or ideologies. I like the ideas of a lot of them. Like I love the idea of Catholicism. I love the idea of the Russian Orthodox Church. Basically anything that has a lot of costumes, a lot of interesting smells, incense, art, great architecture. I love all of that kind of stuff. I even like Christian music, which you could consider all of the Bach cantatas and Bach passions as being part of. So there is a great mystery there that is attractive to me and interesting and inspiring in some way. And this song is the absolute antithesis of all of that, while trying to make something more or less lovely at the same time. I use a lot of mellotron and a lot of orchestration in here of strings and stuff like that to kind of illustrate those ideas. They're somewhat complex, but everything I do seems to have a level of complexity that is just sort of out of hand at times. Other stuff I do is incredibly simple and kind of stupid, but we have kind of a balance of stuff going on here. Another thing that's interesting about this song is there's two completely different mixes of it. One is the stereo mix, which is on the CD. This is the only place that you can hear the stereo mix of this. And then I had Chad Bamford, my mixing engineer, do a mono version because I am a huge fan and proponent of mono music. Back in the days before stereo was in cars, there were little radios that everybody had, and mixes were done specifically in mono because that's the way most people listen to music, especially in the early days of stereo when that was expensive. So, for example, the Beatles catalog, most of the Beatles catalog, the only mixes that the Beatles signed off on were mono mixes. So if you want to hear the mixes the way the Beatles thought they should be, find the Beatles mono box and listen to that. Likewise, the Beach Boys or a lot of other music. So this is me going, mono is cool and you can listen to it anywhere. Coming out of your phone, mono sounds the best, really, even if you have two little speakers in your phone. So the mono version is on the record. The stereo version is on the CD. And both versions are fantastic mixes by Chad. And the one that's in stereo is really headphone candy, as this entire record is. All of my records are pretty much designed to be listened on headphones. If you listen to them out in the air, they sound pretty good too. But in headphones, you really start to hear all the spatial constructs that are going on. And you get to be in the environment that I've created for a lot of these things. And once again, I'm not a set it and forget it type of person. I like to have mixes reflect the actual content and environment and atmosphere of the songs. So all of that is really thought out by me also. I love the recording studio. I love the sounds that you can make in it. And when I'm playing a lot of this stuff live, I don't try to replicate that. The live thing is a different thing. And it's kind of like the difference between going to see a play or going to watch a movie. I mean, those are the most basic sort of illustrations I can give of the difference between the two. So I'd love to hear your comments about all of this kind of stuff, what you think about it. So I thought I would ask Jennifer, my lovely wife, to talk a little bit about the cover, since this is such an extraordinary and fantastic cover, I feel. Leave your comments below.
My inspiration was old, like antique books from the early 20th century and the late 19th century. I want it to look very textural, so if you look closely, you can see there's kind of a texture of a book. And then really closely, you can even kind of see the gold texture in here. I wanted it to give it kind of a sense of wonder, and like if you saw this on a shelf, you'd want to pick it up and read the story. And I try to put as much care and thoughtfulness into it as Mark does into his music, because everything that Mark does with his music is very thought out, and he has a reason behind every single thing he does.
What about the rest of the stuff I do?
Not
so thoughtful. Not so thoughtful there.
And everything he does, he thinks very carefully about what he does. This comes from the photo that's actually on the inside that I took of Mark. It's in New Mexico. Socorro, kind of near Socorro, New Mexico. This beautiful, lonely road that we drove down. We love New Mexico. We go there at least once a year, if not twice.
But none of you should go there because we want it to stay nice.
Exactly. So nobody go there. And this is where I feel like Mark gets lots of his inspiration from these landscapes and the feeling. Do you agree?
I agree. It's probably from also spending part of my childhood, early teenage years in El Paso, effectively being a kind of desert rat. So the desert is solitary, isolated, and you don't have anybody bothering you, which is the main plus points about the desert.
It's almost like the wildness is being contained by the structure.
You hand drew all that.
I hand drew all this. We had to go with blue.
We had to.
Because it's the Bluebird, so it's nothing groundbreaking there, but it's kind of just reinforcing that sentimental feel. This blue is a very kind of, to me, it's like a very vintage blue. And then when you open it, it's like boom. Inside is that marbled paper that's inside of a lot of old books. The back, I wanted it to look almost like a magic book or something. Here's his initials. So this is the CD, but the booklet, we have not looked at it. I've forgotten what it even looks like. Like, I don't even remember this really, to tell you the truth. But I designed it. Let's see. Okay, we're looking at this together. We haven't looked at this in a long time. So here's the cover.
It is.
But yeah, again, I just wanted it to look very intricate and special. I wanted it, and you know what? I wanted it to look kind of traditional. I didn't want it to be anything subversive or bold, or I wanted it just like the record. I feel like it's kind of a sentimental record in a way.
It's very sentimental.
Please listen to this record if you have not. It's so good.
Please listen to my record.
You will cry, and you will be so happy you listened to it.
You'll be so happy that you cried.
This is a picture I took of Mark. We're out in White Sands, New Mexico.
On a side note, this album cover was so fantastic that somebody somewhere decided to do an impression of this cover. But a couple of years after this record came out, apparently a #1 selling gospel artist, Chris Tomlin, and he's also a Grammy Award winning gospel artist. We're going to put it up here for your consideration to see if there's anything even remotely similar between these two album covers. You be the judge.
At least, I mean, they look very, very similar. Artists always take inspiration from everywhere.
Yes, let's just say they were inspired
I took
by
inspiration from other things, but it is the way it's constructed. Even the font, I think, the typeface was very It's all
similar.
very, very
It's
similar. Like just
similar.
everything. But you
And
decide.
and to just put a bow on it, to put a pin on it, let's quote the great satirist and commentator Oscar Wilde on imitation. And I think the quote is, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery paid by mediocrity to greatness. Thanks, Oscar. So all of this was created in a tiny, tiny studio apartment that we lived in.
Yeah, we were living in a really small studio apartment, and Mark was working on this.
So we kind of like traded working spaces. She'd be working on
Well, you
a ton
had
of
your
stuff that
desk and I had my desk.
I had my own desk.
You did, remember? Yours was...
I had my own desk.
We're not going to put this in.
We are going to put this in. This is authentic. This is what the people want. They want. Maybe you're just going to have to be in here from now on. What do you think about that?
Yeah. Thank y'all.
And in closing, I'd like to just talk about just a few of the equipment things that happen in here, just for some of you nerds out there who like to hear about that sort of stuff. As far as amplifiers are concerned, I used my usual battery of high watts. I've got a 77 Mesa Mark I. I've got an 86 Mark III Coliseum. I used a Fender Pro Sonic. I think I used a Vox AC30, and I had all of these running off of a Radial JD7, which is kind of like a multiple output splitter box that has transformers in it. Sounds very good. And then I used my usual complement of Love Tone stuff, which I've spoken about in the past, the incredible British company that made these fantastic effects boxes. Here I've just got some notes talking about, for example, on Radiant Gravity, I'm using my 73 Les Paul with Love Tone Doppelganger set for tremolo. I'm using a wobulator. I'm using Boss Phaser on the song Somnambulist. I'm using a full tone Univibe. I'm using the Roger Meyer Univibe. I'm using Love Tone Doppelganger once again. There's a song Ripen at Noon, which didn't make it onto the album cut, but you can hear this song at my Patreon account. On there it says I'm using Whiteface Rat, Brooklyn, Frantone Cream Puff, and a Love Tone Big Cheese. On the song Nothing Out There, I'm using my Les Paul Custom with 54 reissue with Boss and Max on Chorus boxes, Wobulator, Meatball by Love Tone. On Maximum Hemingway, I'm using the 54 reissue Les Paul, and a bunch of other stuff. This is not really interesting to the general listener, but just to give a flavor of the sort of stuff that I was using to tech nerds out there. And I do pretty much use the same stuff on all of my records, the same amps, same guitars, but I do put new things on there. Occasionally I'm constantly experimenting. So that's just a little tech wrap up on some of that stuff. At the very end of the album, there's maybe like about a minute of silence, and then what you hear is me on guitar and Aaron Lack, who plays drums and vibes on this record, playing the first part of this track, playing the first part of this tune right here which is called I'm Getting Sentimental Over You. And that is a Glenn Miller song from the 1940s, a very popular song during World War II. And so that just seemed like a great way to close out the Bluebird. And I have sort of a loose dream of doing a record of standards with Aaron playing vibraphone, possibly some drums, and me playing guitar. So I've got a big list of songs, and it's something that is on my list to do one of these days. I would love to do that. I love all of these old jazz standards, and Aaron can play the crap out of these. So I'm going to have to work on my chops to be able to do this. There is actually another song that I just remembered that was recorded for the Bluebird, also a song called Widen the Gyre. And you can hear my band playing a version of this song also at my Patreon page. This is a song that I play with my band live, and this is a really cool song, but the nature of the song was just not appropriate for the direction that the Bluebird was heading in. I'm not sure if it'll get a release, an official release ever. Season of Mist has licensed this song, and it was possibly going to be part of a package of a variety of officially unreleased materials. But you can hear a version of this at my Patreon page. And I would just like to invite everybody to take a look at that. Also remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Please check all the links below related to the Bluebird. You can also buy me a coffee. And thanks for going through this record with me. I hope you go and take another listen to it and listen with different ears. If you have already listened to it, listen to the differences between the two versions. And if you haven't listened to it, I hope it makes it interesting enough for you to want to do that. So thanks for your time. The Bluebird is an interesting concept. It's somehow got appropriated in the 20th century to be a symbol of happiness or something like that, but it's been throughout history for millennia, and that's kind of interesting. I've got some notes here about the Bluebird appearing throughout the 20th century, but in previous centuries, for example, in Russian fairy tales, the Bluebird is a symbol of hope. I kind of ran across this through knowing about this play by Maurice Maeterlinck called The Bluebird, which came out in 1908, I think. And it was like a pantomime type of play. And it's a really interesting play. It's basically about these two children, one of which kind of misbehaves and goes off to find the Bluebird of happiness. But it really came onto my radar also because of this Al Jolson song. And I was listening to Al Jolson in 2015, 16, 17, 18. I got on this Al Jolson kick. And before you jump to any conclusions about Al Jolson, I would just like to point out that Al Jolson is pretty much the source for a kind of style of popular singing that goes all the way through the 20th century. You can draw a direct line from Al Jolson to Bing Crosby to Elvis to David Bowie, and it's there, and it's kind of incredible. And more or less, a lot of these people do end up singing about bluebirds also, which is sort of interesting. It's kind of a pre-meme meme, but the Al Jolson song that really kind of put the Bluebird in my head was a song called April Showers from 1921. And it's got these great lyrics to it. It's somewhat depressing and uplifting at the same time, which is what my record sort of is also. But the lyrics to April Showers from 1921 are, "Life is not a highway strewn with flowers, it still holds a goodly share of bliss. When the sun gives way to April showers, here's a point you never should miss. Though April showers may come your way, they bring the flowers that bloom in May. So if it's raining, have no regrets, because it isn't raining rain, it's raining violets. So the chorus goes, and where you see the clouds upon the hills, you soon will see crowds of daffodils. So keep on looking for a bluebird and listening for his song whenever April showers come along. There, I did it. So that's from 1921. So that's over 100 years ago. This song is 103 years old this year. And you can go onto Spotify and hear it incredibly. And it's still a great song. I've made a list of Bluebird appearances below in popular culture throughout the 20th century that you may or may not be interested in checking out. So take a look and see if Bluebirds start appearing for you also. Moving forward, maybe about a decade or so, the great bluesman Sonny Boy Williamson wrote a song called Bluebird, and the line in that is, "My bluebird, bluebird, please take this letter down south for me. Now, bluebird, bluebird, please take this letter down south for me," like repeating blues motif. So moving forward a couple of years to 1939, The Wizard of Oz came out. Everybody knows The Wizard of Oz, and everybody pretty much knows the song Over the Rainbow, which has the lyric, "Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly." And the very next year after The Wizard of Oz came out, there was a Shirley Temple movie called The Bluebird. And there was some talk about Shirley being in the original Wizard of Oz. And there was some ideas that she was too short or she couldn't sing well enough, but really seems, according to her autobiography and some other sources, that basically 20th Century Fox would not let her out of her contract to go and make a movie for MGM. Understandably so, Shirley was #1 box office in the world. As some of you probably know out there, Lori Black was my girlfriend from about 1978 to 1988, and of course her mom was Shirley Temple Black. So I have kind of a personal connection here. The whole time Lori and I were together, I didn't realize that Shirley had actually made a movie called The Bluebird. We didn't sit around and talk about her filmography as a child or anything like that. So it was kind of a revelation for me years and years later, actually up into 2015, before I realized that there was actually a movie called The Bluebird that Shirley was in. And here is a copy of it. And this movie is quite an incredible movie. And since it's made 1 year after The Wizard of Oz, they even basically kind of tried to copy The Wizard of Oz, where they have a sepia tone introduction, and then everything goes into Technicolor as they go into this magical land looking for the bluebird. But I recommend watching this movie because it's even crazier and more psychedelic than The Wizard of Oz on many levels. They go to the land of unborn children, and all this crazy stuff happens there. There's a figure of fire, there's a cat and a dog, and she just goes on an adventure with her little brother, and she's kind of a brat in the beginning of this and kind of finds her way back to being a nice little girl. But I recommend that movie as a watch because it's a crazy movie. Moving on past the 1940s, in 1942, there was a song called The White Cliffs of Dover by Vera Lynn, who's famous for doing the song We'll Meet Again, a very inspirational song during wartime Great Britain when they're being bombed by the Nazis. And she did a song called The White Cliffs of Dover, and there's a bluebird in that line. There'll be bluebirds over the White Cliffs of Dover. And that ended up being a very inspiring song to the British during World War II. Going into the 50s, there's a song called The Color of the Blues by one of my favorite artists, George Jones from Texas. And he wrote a song that has the line in it, "Bluebird sitting on the tree seems to sympathize with me, for he's not singing like he used to do. This must be the color of the blues." And that is a great early George Jones song from 1958. The song "Zippity Doo Dah" from the famous Disney song in 1946 has a reference to Mr. Bluebird on my shoulder, and that song actually won an Academy Award in that year for Best Song of the Year. And I think the actor that portrayed Uncle Remus also won an Academy Award. He was the first black man to win an Academy Award. Unfortunately, there's no way to see Song of the South. For some reason, Disney has canceled that movie. We have no idea why. It's a great movie. I recommend you guys watch it because it's cool. It has great animation, great music. And speaking of Zippity Doo Dah, there's also a really odd version of it by Phil Spector that was done, I think, in 1962 or 1963 maybe. And it's kind of a dirgy version of it with a big Phil Spector wall of sound. And that is a great tune, so you should check out that song, that version of that song also. Also in 1962, there's a song called "Message to Michael" by the great Burt Bacharach, Hal David songwriting team. And in that song, there's a line that says, "Kentucky Bluebird, fly away," or something like that. But there's definitely a bluebird mentioned in that song also. In 1968, in the Beatles' Yellow Submarine movie, at the very end, the leader of the Blue Meanies says that his cousin is actually the Bluebird of Happiness. So the Bluebird is still existing even at that point. And then I've got a few other things that I could mention about bluebirds because they just, when you start looking for them, they start popping up all over the place. The last one I'm going to mention, which comes close to when I actually started working on my version of the Bluebird, is actually on David Bowie's very last record. And it's in a song called "Lazarus" on the record Black Star, which was the record that came out right before David Bowie died. And he actually mentions a bluebird in there. So this is kind of coming full circle all the way around to my record. I've made a list of bluebird appearances below in popular culture throughout the 20th century that you may or may not be interested in checking out. So take a look and see if bluebirds start appearing for you also.